Great, and we're live. So welcome everybody to this remote interview. My name is Lisette, and I'm interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely. And today on the line, all the way from Kalamazoo, Michigan, which is so fun to say, Kalamazoo, Michigan, I have Tom Schwab. Tom, you're the owner and founder of Interview Valet. We're going to get into what you guys do. It's very interesting. You're also an author, a speaker, a teacher, a Navy veteran, running nuclear power plants. That's super interesting. I'm going to touch on that. And an expert in inbound marketing. So I'm really excited to have you on the show. Thank you.
Lisette, I am thrilled to be here, and it just proves that you can be any place now. If you can work from Kalamazoo remotely, you can work from any place remotely.
Indeed. Awesome. So let's start with the first question, which is, what does your virtual office look like? What do you need to get your work done?
It varies, right? My work is what you do, not where you go. So my virtual office looks a lot like my teams of 14 people on the team. So as long as I have an internet connection, a laptop, and a USB microphone that I can plug in, I can pretty much do anything from anywhere. I try to keep everything in the cloud, and while I love being at home because I have dual monitors, I find when I go away and I'm working from a hotel room, it actually makes me more remote. So all of a sudden I'll realize something that's like, oh yeah, that note was on my desk. I need to put that on the cloud. So I travel about 1 week out of every month. So that's the time it really proves to me whether or not I am totally remote.
Right, when you're missing that one note and you know exactly where it is, but you can't remember what it says. Yeah, indeed. So let's start with, what is Interview Valet and what do you guys do? And then I'd like to move into why you set it up the way you did.
Sure. So Interview Valet is a podcast interview marketing service. So it's basically the idea of using content to attract, engage, and delight customers. And the content is podcast interviews. So getting in front of your ideal audiences, get them to know, like, and trust you. It was Rand Fishkin of SEO Moz that said, the best way to sell something today is not to sell anything, but earn the awareness, respect, and trust of those you might serve. So we work with authors, speakers, coaches, emerging brands to get them on the podcasts that their ideal customers are listening to, so they can take people from being just passive listeners to active visitors to their site and ultimately engaged customers. And our business model is, our clients are Sinatra, right? They're the guests, they're the performers, and we're the roadies that take care of everything else.
Yeah, I think what people don't realize about podcasts is there's a lot of behind the scenes work, just getting it set up and getting it right and getting the marketing and all the stuff around it. So it sounds like you guys take care of all of that, and the guests can just be guests.
And it's like anything, there's a system to everything. And if you leave a couple pieces out of the engine doesn't run as well. If you're making a recipe and you leave a couple ingredients out, it doesn't turn out nearly as well. So what we do is not magic. It's really just a system that we've refined, and it's really our zone of genius. And it frees up our clients, the podcast guests, to work in their zone of genius.
Right. You don't want to be for instance, I outsource everything. I've got a producer who does everything because I didn't want to be a podcast expert. I wanted to be a remote working expert. So I thought, here, I'll pay you to be your expert and I'll do my thing. So it sounds like you guys have the perfect way to do that. Now, your team works remotely. You said you have a team of 14 people and everyone works remote. Is that right?
Exactly. So I've had brick and mortar businesses before, and I saw the limitations of them. And I just looked at this and said, I want to build this and find the best people. And amazingly enough, not all the best people lived in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Nor did I want everybody to come into an office and work from 9 to 5. We've got customers throughout the world, and I don't think it's right to tell a customer in the United Arab Emirates that, sorry, that's not a time that we're awake, or our business is shut down for a couple hours because we got snowed in Kalamazoo. So I love the flexibility that it gives our team, and also the access to talent.
So is that the main reason that you decided to hire people from different places? Was the access to talent, or?
I could say that, but I think it's for my own thing too. Right. I'm 52 years old. I've run brick and mortar businesses before, and I didn't like going into an office every day. That commute back and forth. And I didn't feel fair that other people are in there and I'm not in there. And I just looked at it and thought, we don't have to rent this office space. We don't have to commute back and forth. Work is really what you do, not where you go. So as I looked at it and I said, when I built this business intentionally, what do I want it to look like? What do I want to look like going forward? Not, what did a business look like 20 or 30 years ago? And there's challenges to each, but I would never go back to the old style. Just with the personal freedom I have, my commute of to go to work is great. I love that. And in the same way, like this morning, I couldn't sleep. I was up at 3 a.m. And by 3:05, I had a cup of coffee and was working and productive. And I couldn't have done that if I had to drive all the way into work. So with that, it gives me a lot more flexibility. It gives my team a lot more flexibility. And we would have lost some great people had they had not had that flexibility.
Yeah, indeed. And I don't know anybody who would miss the commute. Pretty much everybody I interview loves not having to commute. I mean, making the choice to commute every once in a while to go someplace is a different story. So what are the challenges that you faced when you set up your business like this, or maybe that you're struggling with now?
To me, it's communication, right? Because it's one thing to build a relationship and have the communication when you're all in the same office, when you're having lunch together, when you're running into people. And I think that's still needed in a remote team. So it's like, how do you foster that? And so that's been very intentional. We've got weekly calls where we get together for a half hour, the entire team, and just a quick Zoom call, the same platform we're using now. We've got a private Facebook group where we put, fun pictures of, the first day of school and different things that are going on in people's lives. Because, work, I believe, should still be fun. It should be a place where you can engage with people. I don't want to treat people like robots, where here's your assignment and you're just another nameless, faceless cog. I believe that when you hire a person, you're hiring them for their mind. When you hire an animal, a mule, you hire them for their back. So I think having that personal connection has really made the difference. And we've had a lot of people that had worked remotely before that said they like our culture. And to me, that's probably one of the strengths of our team, because if somebody likes the culture and if they feel bought into the vision and the mission, they'll give you their best. If they don't, then they're just trading dollars for time.
Yeah, indeed. And that is a hard thing to build. Sounds really easy to say, but building a good culture, especially remotely, is a particular challenge for many different teams. So you have a private Facebook group is it for just communicating? Is it communication in general, or is it more for, posting pictures and entertainment? How do you communicate with each other?
So it's more, that is more for the fun stuff, the things that would come up over lunch or pictures you would see on somebody's desk, just celebrating little wins outside. And there's certain things that we want to keep the email for business related. And so we do some, instant messaging through Google Instant Message, but those are typically, and the emails, those are typically business related. If you want to do something fun, go to the Facebook page and do that. And the other thing that we do is a lot of videos. So we either use, quick Zoom video, or we use Loom, which is a great platform. And because my emails are filled with typos and grammatical errors. So for me, it's just easier to hit record, do a quick little Loom video, share a win with the team, and connect with them. Because I think I've heard this attributed to Bill Gates, that he said that email is a great way to share information, but not always the best way to communicate. So we're always trying to make sure that we use email to share information, but we use other things to communicate. And, we're getting to a big enough team now that one of our goals for 2019 is to actually bring people together once a year in a location for a meeting. We haven't done that yet, but that's one of our big goals.
I love it. I've worked on a team that hadn't met for 5 years, and we worked together, and we finally decided that we needed to get together and meet. And man, we had a great time together. I highly recommend it, especially if you get along online, you're going to really get along in person. So highly recommend that. I mean, I was a virtual world. Go ahead.
And you're just shocked by how tall people are,
yeah,
because you've got no standard of reference on people's height, and you meet them and it feel like they've been friends forever, but then it's like, wow, I didn't realize that you were that tall.
Totally true. The height of people is always a surprise, especially if you're coming from the Netherlands. People in the Netherlands are very tall, I noticed. So yeah, it's a very different. So I'm curious about your hiring process. For hiring for remote people can be very challenging because you really need to know what you're looking for. Is there any special methodology that you use, or what your interview process, or something like that?
That's a great question. And it's one of those evolving things that you learn as you go on. One of our requirements now is that people have done remote work before. We hired some great, talented, energetic people, but they never worked remote before. And so they had a lot of challenges. It's just that they wanted the office interaction, and it just seemed like it never worked out if they had never worked remotely. They liked the idea of it, but they had a hard time in the execution of it. We also go through and have multiple people look at them. We always do our interviews over video, so we'll typically use Zoom because there's so many nonverbals that you pick up as you're talking with somebody, and just the feel that you get from them. And we'll always have 3 people look at them before we actually make a job offer to them. So, I'll look at them more from the company culture, the vision, mission. Do they buy into that? We'll have one of the other team members talk with them on the team that they're going to, just to say, hey, is this somebody that really fits in? And that team member will explain to them more what the job and the role is. And then we'll also have the team leader talk with them to say, hey, is this a person that I think will add to the team? Is this somebody that I could manage well? Because it doesn't necessarily mean that candidate is good or bad. They could be great, but do they fit in with what we have and what we need right now? We also use, I know you can't legally say this is a hiring tool, so we use it as a development tool. But the DISC profile, just as something to look and say an outsider's view of what are their strengths. We also use, once they're on board with us, we use the Strength Finders test from Gallup. I'm a big proponent of that. I think when I was in the Navy, a chief told me, if his mom couldn't change him in 18 years, you're not going to change him now. And now I know I was in an all-male Navy in the nuclear power back in those days, and I think it's just that it just shows that people are wired a certain way. And I don't want to fix anybody because you're not broken. God made you a certain way, and if you don't fit what we need, we should open you up to go someplace else. So we're looking for somebody's strengths that fit into us. So that's a tool we look at also.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. There's a number of tools that people use, different personality profiles, Myers-Briggs, all these. But yeah, it can really give some great insight into how people work and what their strengths are, what they're going to be good at. For onboarding, is there a particular process that you use? Once you've decided to hire somebody, do you have a certain onboarding process, or?
We do. And I think especially you want to set people up to win. You want them to be successful. Even with policies and procedures, you just can't give somebody, here's your login, go to it. And we really try building a team culture here. So when somebody comes on board, we assign them a partner, a mentor for their first period of time. Typically that's 60 to 90 days. And it's somebody just that can look out for them. It's one of the more senior people that they can connect with. Because the other thing too is that we don't want to take somebody that's totally new to our organization and put them in front of one of our clients or put them in front of a podcaster, right? We want to vet them and make sure. So it's sort of a training partnership process so that they can get up to speed and get little wins along the path. And then at a certain point, their mentor goes, man, they are just rocking it. And, they don't need to be under my wing anymore. But it also builds some camaraderie in the team too.
Oh, sure. And it's nice to have somebody to go to when you have questions or when you're not sure, or you're afraid to ask in public. Like, I have this question, but I'm afraid to ask. It's nice to have sort of the buddy system there, to have somebody to go to. So, okay, great. I love it. Setting people up to win and assigning a mentor. That sounds like the right way to go. So I'm very curious. I've got some more remote working questions, but I'm really curious. How did you go from running nuclear power plants to running Interview Valet? What's the story there?
Well, there's you can tell from my gray hair. There's quite a few years between that, but I was blessed enough to go to the U.S. Naval Academy. So all the U.S. taxpayers, thanks for paying for my education. But I ran nuclear power plants, and I always look back on that and say that was an amazing time because the average person running a power plant is 21 years old with a high school education. Now, they're highly trained, highly motivated, but I think it really shows that there's a system. There's a system that people are taught, that there's a culture that is taught. So with that it can be used. And I always look back at that. And even in my business, and when other people say, well, you don't understand my business, it's complicated. It's too complicated to teach. And even when I tell myself that, it's like, no. If I can't teach my business, that means I don't understand it. If they can figure out a way to teach how to run a nuclear power plant, I can figure out a way to systematize my business. And often when there's a failure, it's not a failure in the people. It's either a failure in the system or the management. So that's where I started. And then I went into corporate America, worked in engineering, then in operations, sales, and marketing. And then I started my own business. And that business was an e-commerce business that was built using the principles of using content exposure to grow your business. And at that time, content was blogs. And one of the hacks we used was getting your blog on somebody else's site, guest posting. So instead of me posting a blog on my site and having it seen by 3 people, one of them being my mom, we put it on bigger sites and get that know, like, and trust. So after we built that company up from a regional player to a national leader, I started to look at it and said, could you use guest appearances on podcasts the same way? And so about 4.5 years ago, we started to test that for a handful of people. It worked amazingly. And at first, my engineer and me said, no, this is too good to be true. So we kept testing it, refining it, proving it, and said, no, it really is a system that is reproducible. And that really came out to be podcast interview marketing. And at the end of 2015, we had quite a few people said, hey, you've been teaching me how to do this, but I don't want to learn how to make the recipe. I don't want to learn how to build the engine. I just want to be the guest and let you take care of all the rest. So we started to beta test that in the end of 2015, took it out of beta in 2016 with 3 remote workers. So it was myself and 2 other people, took it out of beta, and both of those people were part-time. And so we started with that and grew it, and now we're at 14 people on the team, 10 full-time equivalents. But it's grown to where we serve over 100 clients. We work with authors, coaches, speakers, and it's been fun because HubSpot, which really helped me grow my business, my first business with inbound marketing, they taught me inbound marketing, has now become a client of ours. So it's sort of come full scale on that. And I'm always amazed at the people I get to meet.
Yeah, indeed. I love podcasts. Absolutely. I was a big fan of radio back in the day, even though radio still exists, but I was still a big fan of radio programs. And when podcasts came along, that just changed everything, because now I no longer had to set my alarm clock to wake up at a certain time to make sure I caught the radio program that I wanted to hear. So yeah, now you just stream it to whatever device you're on. It's amazing. Totally amazing.
And I'm an Audible learner. So if I read a book, a lot of times I'll have to read it a couple of times because my mind will wander. And what I realized is that I learned best in college by going and listening to the professor or going to a study group and listening to what other people said. I'm an audible learner. And so now I just love listening to podcasts. And a lot of times it's weird to talk to you, Lisette, because I'm used to hearing you at 1.5 times speed
Ha!
because I'll always speed up the podcast. I say I listen at 1.5 times speed as I run at half X speed. But I just know myself that I'm easily distracted, a little ADHD, so that if I speed it up, I've got to focus on it. And in the same way with audible books, if I speed them up, I have to focus on it, and I'll comprehend more. I'll also drive my wife crazy if she's in the car
Ha!
while I'm listening to a book at 2x.
That's funny. I've heard that people use that trick a lot. My husband does it for videos online if he's watching a tutorial. It's always at 1.5 speed or something. And at first I thought, what is these chipmunks that he's listening to? But it totally works. It totally works. It's a great tip, actually, for people who are out there. So on your team, how do you know what people are doing?
That's part of the process we're looking at also. When we look for people, I don't want to look to people that I have to manage. If I have to manage them, they're the wrong person. I need to be able to lead them. And so with that, I know what they're working on because we have service level agreements between our various teams and said this is what we will provide to the other teams, to our members, to our customers. We use tools like Asana for task management, so I can see what somebody's working on, what they've assigned to me, and it's very much that way. We've also started to do team huddles for our leadership team. So every morning I'm able to talk with my direct reports and go through the key performance indicators for the previous day, what things they're stuck on, what things they're working on that day. And so with that, I find that the pace of improvement has greatly improved on that, or has sped up when we've gone to the daily meetings. And then each one of our team leaders, we've got it's 4 different teams. They have meetings with their team also, just a quick 15-minute huddle, so that they can make sure they're moving the roadblocks for people and also communicating. Once again, Asana and email is a great way for sharing information, but we want to make sure we've got something every day that we're communicating with too.
Listen, I think that's part of when we bring people on. I want to have people that don't need to be managed, but need to be led. So if they need to continual management, they're probably the wrong person for our team. So we want self-starters. That being said, there's a lot of tools out there. So we use Asana for task management. We also do team huddles. So every day I've got a 15-minute team huddle with my leadership team when we go through the key performance indicators, what things they're working on, what things they're stuck with. And then they have a quick 15-minute huddle with their teams also. So it gets back to that thing of, we use the electronic tools to share information, but we always make sure that there's a way to communicate each day also.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, having the time in between, or the daily talking of just, okay, today this is what we're going to do, especially as a remote team. What happens when there's a misunderstanding or when there's conflict on the team? I mean, it happens to the best teams. It's just inevitable.
And to me, I'd say it's worse on a remote team because you can make so many assumptions. So if I'm busy and my caps are on an email and I just respond to you, was he yelling at me? What did he mean by that? And we've had a lot of those where all of a sudden people made assumptions and there was conflict on there. And so part of that is that I've learned to run toward the fire. If there is a conflict, let's get everybody that's involved on a Zoom call and let's talk this through. And the ground rules that I always start with is that we've got to make the assumption that everybody's heart is in the right place. We're all trying to do the best for the company. And I'm probably the worst at this because I can send off a quick email that could be viewed as terse, cold, rude. Well, it's because I'm running onto an airplane and I've got, 30 seconds to get this email out, or it's not going out in the next 2 hours. So we always try to give each other the benefit of the doubt. And then also from the standpoint of trying to make sure that the things don't fester too long. And there's a great book out there called The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And one of his things of the Four Agreements is never make assumptions. So if you don't know something, don't just assume that, since Tom had the caps on, he was yelling at me. Just ask on that. And I think that's important, and especially with a remote team, that misunderstandings are going to happen, but addressing them quickly.
Yeah, I like the don't letting things fester, and like small things can really blow into bigger things if we let them go too long, just because of and it is so hard not to make assumptions. I mean, as people, we assume things. That's just how we work. So I once had a boyfriend who was really, who said, assume nothing. He had a bumper sticker that said, assume nothing. And he was so good at it. And it really made me realize how many assumptions I was making on a day-to-day basis. It's astounding, actually. And especially with multicultural teams, assumptions can really, they can really get in the way. Do you work with people who are mainly in the U.S. or is it a global team?
Right now, we're just a U.S.-based team. I've got one personal assistant that works with me that's based out of the Philippines. But we're looking at that as how can we expand? And the big part is different time zones. Because right now we go from East Coast time zone to Pacific time zone, which covers a lot of the world, but there's still, it'd be beneficial to cover it 24/7. And especially like we're looking now for some customer service, sort of sales onboarding, somebody in Australia, because now we can cover things 24 hours a day, because it's not right to tell a customer you need to do a meeting at 6 a.m. or 6 p.m. Just to coordinate with U.S. time zones.
Right. It is becoming a more global world, and it's the podcast world. So you have a global audience and a global guests. I can imagine. We're coming to the end of the time, which is crazy. It went so fast, and I have so many more questions, but I've got to cut it off. But I have two more things left, which is if advice for people who are starting out. So somebody maybe who wants to start their own company and hire remote employees, what do you wish you knew when you were first starting?
I would say what's ordinary to you is amazing to others, and the flip side of that, right? What you don't know, other people do, and they just think it's ordinary. So I think that asking questions, we had talked before about not making assumptions. I read a book recently. It's called Eyes Wide Open. I think it was Isaac Levitsky was the author of it. But he said you should ask questions like a 5-year-old. I'm sorry, ask questions like a lawyer and answer them like a 5-year-old, right? Don't make assumptions. Just keep asking questions. And what you need to know, somebody already knows out there. And it's never been easier to find that person and ask those questions. And people are open. They want to help each other. So don't feel like you've got to reinvent the wheel. That problem that you're having right now, there's 1,000 other people online that have had that problem. And if you just have the courage to ask it and then keep asking the question so that you understand it, your life will be much better. And we all start out somewhere. And somebody told me this very early on, and it helped me. He's like, every time you hit a roadblock, just thank God. And I'm like, why? He says, because that speed bump right now, that's something that you need to learn. And while it seems big right now, if you don't figure that out, you're going to come back and hit it again. And when you're going 100 miles an hour, that speed bump could be deadly. So with that, you hit a roadblock, you hit a speed bump, just say, thanks, I'm glad that I learned it right now. How can I learn this so I don't repeat it, and go on from there? It makes things look less formidable.
I like that perspective. Indeed, be thankful for the roadblocks and learn fast. So they don't before you go fast. Learn fast. So last question is, if people want to learn more about you and they want to learn more about Interview Valet, where should they go?
Sure. And you know what? I'll just make a page back on the website just for your listeners. And so if they go to interviewvalet.com /collaboration, I'll put all my contact information there. And so if you've got any questions, Lisette mentioned the book that I wrote, Podcast Guest Profits, How to Grow Your Business as a Podcast Guest. You can buy it on Google or on Amazon. I actually give away more copies than anything. So if you go there to interviewvalet.com /collaboration superpowers, I'll put the free book there that you can download. There's the checklist that I use for all of my interviews. There's also a PDF that's how to get booked, the 6 secrets to getting booked on your first podcast interview. What you know, it's ordinary to you, but amazing to other people. And if I can help you in any way, please just reach out to me there at interviewvalet.com /collaboration superpowers.
Awesome. Thanks for the special page on the website. I'll be sure to put that in the show notes and to promote that as well. Thank you so much, Tom, for your help. I hope lots of people reach out to you because you don't have to learn podcasting yourself. Let the experts take care of it and let yourself just be the guest. It's way better that way. So thank you again for your time today, Tom. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Until next time, everybody, be powerful.